by sections. Let's first focus on the top section in here because I'm drawing some contrast between the previous gradebook and the current gradebook. Oh my God. You may recall that in the previous gradebook, when you would access the gradebook, number one, it would remember the last view where you were, right? And you also had 4 tabs. Those tabs were the overview tab. It was also just the regular grid view that we have in here. We also had a student view tab or student tab, and then the list or gradable items list tab, okay? Now you will see that there's no such thing as different tabs, and instead now we have icons and we have different sections. Now, I use these or I reference these just to drive the first main idea behind this gradebook redesign. And it is just to keep the user, in this case, obviously the faculty member, in context, meaning like keeping the tasks, keeping the workflows, keeping everything within the gradebook, so that way I, as the instructor or as the user, will need to leave the gradebook at the least, as least as possible. That's what I was trying to say. In other words, trying to keep as much information within the context of the gradebook so that I can execute on all of those tasks that I need to do when I am accessing the gradebook, when I am grading, without having to leave. And if I have to leave the gradebook, I get also a shortcut, if you will, or a direct path to get back into the gradebook and be exactly where I was. Because of that, or because behind that thinking, that's why we are redesigning not just the entire gradebook, but also in particular the top section over here that I was highlighting that has the grid view, that has other icons. So let's actually review all of these icons in detail. All right, the easiest one to tackle at first, it is the overview tab that now it is called the to-do list or the to-do button that it's right here on the upper right-hand side. Okay, so when we click on that to-do, that's going to open up the area where you have the list of all the gradable items that you have to grade as the instructor, right? And then the second section at the bottom is all the grades that you need to post as well. You may recall that in Ultra, now the instructor is in control of determining when those grades are posted, right? So I also now have the additional task, if you will, of posting grades. Now, because I, as the instructor, can perceive that as an additional task, an additional step to do, just remember that at the assignment or at the assessment level, rather, whether it's a test or an assignment, I, as the instructor, also have the opportunity to, with a little check mark, check a box that would allow for that assignment, for that test, to post the grades automatically, so that way I can avoid that next step. However, the flip side of that, the importance of having that option now that we didn't have in the past, is that now I am in full control on determining when those grades are posted. And then also it gives me the opportunity just to, for instance, in an assignment where I have a rubric, have the opportunity to provide that feedback, to select the levels of achievement for each one of the grading rubric categories, right? But also just be in full control when I want to release those grades as well. All right, so this to-do tab is, or to-do panel rather, is the area, again, when we go to grade our submissions, but also to post our grades. Now, for the sake of keeping things as clear as possible, I'm gonna jump into one of the submissions in here, just to illustrate that the gradebook, yes, it is changing. Hold on, I should have another submission in here. Come on. Right. Let's actually use, oops. Maybe we have another submission here because I don't know why this is not rendering. Let's use Lenny as an example, okay? Notice that oh man, I hate the feedback when you record that because sometimes it catches you at the wrong time, and this is a good example of that. But anyways, let's disregard that. Let's focus on the grading workflows that we have in place. I'm not going to spend too much time in here. This is just for me to illustrate that just like before, your grading workflows will not be disturbed by the new gradebook. You still have your panel on the left-hand side, and you have the flexibility to select the students that you need to grade, right? This happens to be an assignment, so therefore we don't have the option to grade by questions. If we had a test where you have different oh goodness, I just saw it's all good meme material. Yeah, I can anticipate now that being out there. So anyways, we have the question section here grayed out. These questions tab is what allows us just to grade tests by question rather than by student, right? So all of these, like I said, nothing changes in here. Let's shrink this. And then on the right-hand side, I still have the opportunity, for instance, for the submission to leave some feedback here, the overall feedback. But also, if I had multiple attempts, I have the opportunity just to leave that attempt feedback as well. I have the rubric in here. Notice how in this rubric for this category, I left some feedback. I have selected the level of achievement for each one of these categories. I still have the opportunity to pop out that rubric as well. So my point in here is just to bring some reassurance that your grading workflows are not disturbed. They will not change as a result of this gradebook redesign. Now let's get back, and this is in some ways helps me illustrate. Remember, I mentioned to you that we're trying to keep everything within context so that you don't have to leave the gradebook. But if you happen to leave the gradebook, and then once you do whatever it is that you need to do away from the gradebook and you come back, so in this case, when I close this, I'm exactly where I was, including the tab that was open when I left as well. All right. So that's the to-do tab. But again, I use this as an opportunity just to illustrate that nothing else changes. Along those lines, before I forget, any overall grades, any calculated columns that you have added, all of that remains the same as well. So it's important for me, for us, to bring reassurance to all of those users out there, because when it comes to grades, everybody, including myself, if I was teaching or when I was teaching, I was very apprehensive about my calculations, about my overall grade. I have everything the way that it is supposed to be. Please don't mess with it. We're adhering to that. We're following that. We're not messing with any overall grades calculations. We're just changing the way that the information is displayed on the screen. All right, so that's the to-do list. Let's now slide over to the left, because in here, we still have that search gradebook option. Now, just to draw a little bit of contrast between this option, the search box, that allows me just to search for one item to be as efficient as possible, if you will. So in this case, I'm searching just for one student, right? So I select that student. That's going to give me all the information about the student, all the grades available. Now, this particular use case would be useful. Let's say that if you're teaching face-to-face, and you're going to ask Ella to stop by your office because, as you can see here, her grade is not the best. Now you have the opportunity to just have this as a visual aid for your conversation, to support your conversation without having to worry about covering the rest of the students listed in the gradebook, right? Adhering to FERPA, all of those things. Now you can use this one student, one item to search in the gradebook. Or you can just search one gradable item or one column as well. So let's say that I'm looking for a test and I want to just review one item in the gradebook, and I just want to see week one test for everybody on my in my class. So this is fantastic just for a quick one-off search to display something, right? But what if you actually want to display more than just one column or more than just one student? This area in here, it used to be the filters. It was called filters in the old gradebook. Now there's not an icon that says filters. Now this is, I don't know, this line icon, I guess. It's not a hamburger because this is more of a hamburger. But these lines in here, or this icon, is the one that allows me then to open that panel in here. In the past, it wasn't necessarily grouped in one area where you could manipulate the filters that you could bring into the mix. So for instance, using the previous example, if I still want to look at Ella, So I can just, instead of scrolling, look for her. I select Ella, but instead of just looking at just one student or like all the grades for one student, in this case, Ella, now I can also, for instance, display all the test scores by selecting this test category, right? And so now I have Ella and all the test categories. And when I apply that filter, that gives me the opportunity, yes, to still see one student in this case, because that's what I selected. But instead of just looking at one column or all the grades, as I previously showed, now I have the opportunity to look at, in this case, more than one gradable item. All of these happen to be part of that test category that it's being displayed in here. So that's how I can see things. Also, another thing that I love, and this is not necessarily something new, but this is something that I really appreciate about Ultra in comparison to previous iterations of the gradebook, is that I have visuals in here that are going to help me understand that whatever it is that I'm seeing in here, it is a filter. So in other words, if I logged in and I look at this view right here, I don't need to panic wondering where are all my grading columns that were there before. I don't see calculated columns that are going to help me then come up with my final grade. I know that there are filters here in place. And for instance, if I were to turn off just the Ella filter in here, I still see those three categories and I see it for all the students. Or even if it's not just students, let's say that I want to be more granular about this. If I come back in here and I want to use these tests, but instead of using one student or all the students, I can also leverage the groups that are available in this course, right? So let's say new group 3. By the way, I need to do a better job of naming these groups. So this is not a best practice. Let's use that as a big no-no when you're naming groups. But now that I have this group 3, the test categories, and I apply this, now I see those 3 students that belong to that group, and then also the 3 columns that are associated with this category. So this filter option in here is putting everything in one panel and being able to manipulate this data from one, giving you better management tools, if you will, on how you want to display the information in the gradebook, and all included in one area as well. Now, I can also easily clear these filters, apply these, and now I'm back to where I was. All right. Let's move over now to this icon in here, which is the list view of the gradebook. Okay, really there are no significant differences in here from what it was before and what it is now. You still have a summary or a list of all the gradable items, as well as the summary for each one of these gradable items. For instance, with this week 1 test, it is in red because the due date that it's displaying here has passed. And then also I know that there are 5 missing submissions, right? So you still get that summary for each one of these gradable items. You still also have that column that gives you the category for each one of those gradable items, the due date, also the grading status, so how many of these you have to grade or how many actions you need to take for each one of these gradable items, as well as the grades that you need to post for each one of these gradable items as well. You also have the opportunity to drag and drop, right? So you can manipulate the order on how these columns are being displayed. I went crazy over there. Let me get back to where I was because I don't want to disturb the order. So you used to have the opportunity, and then just pointing out the obvious, I guess, in here, universal symbol in Ultra, right? Whenever you have these 3 dots, the ellipses in here, that tells you that there are some additional options associated with each one of these gradable items. Just for the sake of illustrating a couple of things, this first row is an assignment. So when I select those additional options, just like before, I still have the option to send a reminder to all my students who have not submitted, right? So as you can see here, there are 9 submissions of 12. So that means that there are 2 out there who have not submitted, right? So I can send that automated reminder. So when I select this, Ultra is going to learn, you know what, there's an automated message that it's going to be delivered to your users or to your students rather. It's going to be 3 of them. So by me clicking send, it's just a default template that it's being sent that for this course on this assignment with this due date, you still don't have a submission, right? So this is just alerting me, again, nothing new out of the ordinary. This is an assignment. This is where you can download the results for that assignment. This is new. I guess I'll add this as a new add-on. Recently, a rubric report. So in other words, this is a report that it's going to let you see how your students are performing in this in this particular assignment, but not necessarily from the statistics point of view. So let's click on the statistics. So in other words, these column statistics, excuse me, is giving you, for instance, the grade distribution, the overall statistics, for instance, the median, the average, all that fun stuff. We still have those column statistics. Let's go back to where I was, because this rubric report, and it might take a little while for me to create this one, so I will start running it, but I know I need to stay here for it to complete. So apologies, I'm going to step away from this just to point out that this report, the difference between this report and the column statistics is that this report will give you the student performance, but from the rubrics point of view, if you will. So in other words, it's going to look at all the criteria outlined in the rubric, the different levels of achievement, and using that as a basis, then to give you information about how your students are performing for this particular assessment from the rubric's point of view versus the statistics that I just showed you, that it's just looking at numbers without any context, if you will. Let me pause in here to see if you have any questions between the rubrics report and the column statistics. Mississippi 1, Mississippi 2, Mississippi 3, silence has spoken. All right, it's as clear as mud. That's good. All right, now the delete is very obvious, right? We can delete this gradable item, but I do want to, and this is why I saved this one for last, this edit option is something new that it's available in this list view of the gradebook. If I click on this edit option right here, this is going to take me directly to the area where I can edit not just, in this case, the assignment, but also edit the settings for this assignment. In the past, you needed to take a scenic route, if you will, to get to this area, because you needed to go to the submissions tab from the gradebook. In other words, you would line in here, and then from within here, then you would have to click on these content and settings to get to this area, right? Now you just have a straight shot to getting into the settings of this assignment to edit the assignment if necessary. So from within here, if I wanted to change the due date, if I wanted to, just modify anything in here, I have a straight shot from the gradebook into the settings. And since I am here, I'm going to point out to what I shared with you earlier about having the opportunity to where is it? Post grades automatically. Am I missing it in here? Here we go. It was right there in front of me. Assessment grades. Obviously, there are submissions in here, and there's a rubric associated with it. So I don't have the opportunity anymore to check or uncheck this box in here, but this is what allows you to post those grades automatically, okay? Now that I have made changes to my settings, or now that I have reviewed the settings for this particular assignment and I finish with all of these, at the top, now we have these breadcrumbs that will allow me now in one shot, click in the gradebook in here and get back to where I was. So in other words, this goes back another way to illustrate how keeping as much information as possible within the gradebook, but if you have to leave, in this case, if I want to edit this, right, as soon as it takes me straight into the settings, I can always go back to where I was and then move on and continue to work on my grading, on my calculations, whatever it is that I need to execute. And again, this option of editing is available for each one of the gradable items that you have in here. Something new that it's going to bring efficiency and keep everything within context. All right. Let's go back over here. Now, one more thing to review at the top of all of this, and this is something that I think Oscar pointed out in the beginning, and it is this gear icon right here. It's the same icon, or it serves the same purpose as it would serve before in terms of the gradebook, because this is the area that would take me to the gradebook settings. The icon looks a little bit smaller. By the way, it looks smaller because we're trying to make the best of the real estate that we have on the screen, right? So we have resized things, we have changed the layout, not the layout, I'm sorry, the sizing, the spacing in the screen, just so that we can utilize as much real estate as possible. And now, once I click on this gradebook settings on this icon, we'll come back to this section in here, but just know that everything continues to be the same, meaning that you still have the option, for instance, to set up your grading schemas, to also set those flags that are going to help you recognize those students who are or may be at risk, automatic zeros, the course activity, if you want to notify your students about those flags that you're setting. So bottom line, all of the settings that were there before, including categories and even the rubrics right here at the bottom, everything is still there. There are two sections that have been placed inside these gradebook settings that in the past were not necessarily in here. They were displayed somewhere else. One of them are the options for you to download or upload the gradebook. In the past, let me exit out of here. Along with this settings icon, there was a couple of icons, one with an arrow pointing up, another one with the arrow pointing down. Those were the icons that would help you execute on that action to download or upload the gradebook. Those icons are gone, but that doesn't mean that the functionality is gone. Now that is placed inside the gradebook settings. And then the one that I like the most, because you may recall, I just made reference about making the best use of the real estate on the screen, but also giving you management tools that are going to help you be more efficient when it comes to grading. I have now the option to list my students either by first name or by last name, first name. Right now, I have this last name, first name selected. You will see that if I point your attention, you know what, let's exit because it is hard to see when it is grayed out. I see that all of my students are listed by last name and then first name, right? And I still have the opportunity to sort everything, but it's going to be using the last name as the source or as the key to sort things in the gradebook, right? If I go back into these settings, I also have the opportunity to switch that around and list everything by first name. So the minute that I selected this option in here, now you will notice that all my students are listed now based on their first name rather than their last name. Now, really nothing earth-shattering out of all of these. My favorite thing out of this particular update is the fact that now I have the option to also display the student ID. So if I toggle this little switch in here, that's going to turn on the student ID. So let me exit from here so that we can see this better. Now I have a new column in my gradebook that is going to display the student ID. This is going to be really useful, especially when I am posting final grades, when I am looking at overall grades, to really recognize and identify the student that I need to be evaluating, that I need to be entering the data for if you have that process at your institution. Also useful if I have, in this case, I only have 11 students, right? Keep in mind that this is a demonstration course. By the way, notice how the preview user doesn't have a student ID, which is also useful as well. But now, for instance, if I had a course where there is like 50 plus students and I have one or more students with the same first name and last name, right? Now I have another identifier that it's going to help me identify who that student is. Again, just bringing more data points into the gradebook that are going to allow me to be more efficient. No significant thing, but nevertheless important for me to have now that additional data point. And then also having the flexibility, let me go back over here, to remove that if I want to make use of the real estate in here. So closing this section of this walkthrough of the gradebook is this top section over here that gives us access to the different views, to filtering, to searching, to know what we need to do, but also access to the settings of the gradebook. So any questions you have related to this? All right, excellent. Let's now move on to the next portion of the gradebook. You may recall that I made reference to the student view. The student view tab is no longer available in the gradebook because now the student tab, if you will, is now right there in the gradebook, meaning that this information in here is the same information that was being displayed on that student tab, meaning that I had the opportunity then to drill down and look at the information for each one of the students in my course. So in this case, if I select Ella and I click on Ella, that's going to take me to the area that we had access before when we were looking at an individual student. And we can see all the different grades for all the different gradable items for this particular student, in this case, Ella, right? So I have the grades for each one of those gradable items. One of the things that I want to highlight in here that I love, it's not new, but important for me just to highlight it, is that now in Ultra, if you leave feedback as the instructor for your students, Ultra keeps track on whether or not your students have reviewed that feedback. So as you can see in here, Ella has reviewed the feedback that I left for this syllabus quiz, and then also for this assignment in here. And if I leave my mouse on top of it, you can see that this was reviewed by Ella on January 7 of 26. My goodness, that was some time back. Anyways, this is useful because, and I will just make reference for now, one of the things that I plan to show you in just a little bit is the automations. That gives us the opportunity just to look at, or not look at, but rather set things up so that we can provide immediate feedback for our students based on certain criteria. So in this case, when students reviewed the feedback that is left for them, the instructor now can set an automatic email or an automatic message that is sent to those students, letting them know, hey, great job reviewing your feedback. This is going to help you to be successful in this course, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Now, other things to point out in here that are not necessarily new, but it's important for us to highlight. You have a progress tab for each student, right? This is the area where you can actually monitor and keep track, in this case for Ella, whether or not she's accessing the different content areas in the course. This by itself is really nothing more than just you seeing whether or not the content that you're putting out there is relevant for Ella, right? But this could be an additional data point that when you start pairing that with the grades and you add also the opportunity for you to look at this other tab, which is the activity log, where certain events are being tracked. So for instance, in this case, as you can see in here, and this is a demonstration student, right? So there's not going to be a lot of activity in this case, but this activity log monitors the type of events that Ella has executed in the course. So for instance, when she looked at an announcement, when she completed a test, notice that for any gradable item like a test, you also will get additional information like the IP address and also the attempt log. So when I click on that, like I mentioned before, this is a demonstration student, so please don't pay too much attention as at the lack of data in here, but still important for me to illustrate, right? The attempt for this test, the actual submission receipt, the overall grade. But again, just as part of each one of the events in here, you have another data point that is going to help you start connecting the dots of those data points to get a better understanding, a better feel on why, for instance, Ella is getting the grade that she's getting right here on the upper right-hand side. One of my favorite things that I would like to highlight out of the list of events in here is not when she read an announcement, is not when she logged in, although I do recognize that that is important. Is not when she started to reply or draft a message in a discussion. For me, is this LTI item access. So this is a good indicator for me to know as the instructor that those third-party tools that I'm bringing into my course, are they being accessed by the student? This is a good indicator. Now, I also want to clarify that this only lets me know whether or not they are clicking, they are accessing that tool, but it is not monitoring the activity that is taking place on that third-party tool, okay? That is outside the scope of the data that we have. You may recall that we make a big deal about copyright, data privacy, all of those things. That's a third-party data that, yes, we can bring it into the learning management system through that integration, but we are not going to go uninvited and look at their data over there, okay? However, important for me to point out that you now, as the instructor, will have the opportunity to know whether or not they're accessing the tool and whether or not it's bringing value to them. So All of these, oh, one more thing. This is actually nothing new other than the placement of this option in here, because now also within this student view, I can look at the activity when it comes to announcements for Ella, right? So all the announcements that I have available in my course, and when they were posted, but also whether or not Ella has access those announcements here as well. So this new tab that gives you information about the announcements. Now, let me go to that closing statement that I was want to share in just a little bit. The announcements, the activity log, the progress, the grades, all of these data points now are giving me a clear picture on why Ella is getting this grade. And from within here, what we refer to as actionable insights, once I have all that complete information, from within here, I can also send a message to Ella to say, hey, let's have a conversation, or like, you know what, I see that you're not accessing the content, or I see you're not accessing the tools that I made available through this integration, right? So now you can take action on those insights. In this area, just like before, and you will notice that Ella has some accommodations associated with her because we have this banner. This is where I can just select the accommodations for Ella that will carry not just for one assignment or one assessment, but rather carry throughout all of those assignments that either have a due date associated to it or a time limitation associated to that assignment or assessment rather. All right, so this is the student view in a nutshell. Let me step away from this. And now let's actually look at the core of all of this, which is the grid view, okay? First, let's look at each one of these gradable items. In the gradable items, when I click on that column, you will see that there's a right-hand side panel that we refer to as the assessment details panel. This is the area where I'm going to have a summary of that gradable item, which I find it fantastic because now I have on the right-hand side the opportunity to see the due date, how many points this assignment is worth, whether or not it's visible to my students, what category does it belong to, how many attempts am I allowing for this assignment, how am I posting the grades, that it's manually posted, right? But also to me, the highlight out of all of this is also giving me information about what students have accommodations associated with them, but also what students I have made exceptions for when life happens and for one assignment, I need to either give an extension or increase the number of attempts, or only display these for this particular student from this date to that date. I can do that through these exceptions, but also exempt the students as well. And now I have that information available to me in here from within this panel as well. Now, also one more thing from within here, you may recall in the list view, I made reference to that new option on that pull down menu or that list of menu items, which was the edit option. Well, you have the same functionality in here, and the way that you go back to the settings or to edit the settings of this gradable item is by clicking on the title or the name of that column or gradable item. So when I click on here, that's going to take me straight into the settings the way that I showed you before. And now when I click on the gradebook, it's going to take me right back to where I was, including the assessment details panel that it's available in here. I also have the opportunity to look at the items that I need to grade, very similar to what I shared with you before. I am not sure why the submissions are not displaying in here. That's part of a live demonstration. Always something has to go as not planned. But anyways, just to have the same option to reach to your gradable items, and then also to post the grades as well. You also have the option to send those automated reminders. That's this little icon in here, right? So I can click to send that reminder. I also have the opportunity to download the results, to look at that rubric report that I shared with you before. And then also this third icon in here is just the gradebook, not the gradebook, the grade column statistics as well. The same thing that I shared with you before. So this panel in here, again, very useful, very important for me to have access to while I am modifying, while I am reviewing any of the grades available in this column. Now, let's go back to this column because these icons that you see in here, it's just the same icons or the same functionality, the same pathway that you have, not the same pathway, but the same purpose that these two buttons have in here. One of the beauties about the redesign of the gradebook is that now we're also providing you different pathways to get to your destination. So if I want to grade, I can click on this button, or just from within here, this number 2, I click on that, That's telling me there are 2 gradable items to display. That takes me to my grading workflows. If I want to post grades, this one actually gives me more concrete numbers versus this button over here on the right-hand side that I can post 7 grades. Now, here's a tricky one. Hopefully you're able to see my mouse in here, right? Or my pointer. I'm making a big deal. Hopefully you identify it. Now, right below these 2 icons, if I move down, I'm going to see this little pen in here. It's a little bit hidden. Now, there are reasons for that because we don't want to accidentally start editing cells without us wanting to edit those cells. But this icon in here, it's giving me the opportunity now to edit. So when I click on it, it's giving me the opportunity to manually edit the grades or the data, the numbers that are in each one of the cells for this grading column. You don't see it right now, but I am navigating using my keyboard. Or if I were to press enter, that also gives me the opportunity to move down to the next cell. So this is an opportunity, or this is an option rather, for me to enter grades manually if I wanted to. And once I'm done, I'm not going to modify any of these grades. Once I'm done, I'm going to click on this little check mark. And that is that, right? So now I also have the opportunity to edit all of these grades manually. Any questions before I move on now to actually click on individual cells and look at the submission details? Hold on, let me review the chat. I think we are, I think we're good. Keep me honest here, please. Okay. Oh, thank you for posting those ideas. Excellent. Yeah. If you that's a good point because we're trying to find that perfect balance, right? This is hidden. Yeah, it's a little hidden, right? But also this prevents me from getting myself into trouble. So finding that balance and using your feedback to be able to strike the perfect balance it's always our goal. All right, so I know that we don't have much time, so I want to be respectful. Let's look now at the grade details, right? So I am going to select, let's go with Adam in here. Notice that when I click on a specific cell, a new panel opens up, and this is what we call the grade details panel. Now, this panel is going to give me information just about this particular grade and this particular student. So in this case, I can see that it is Adam who I have selected. He has a grade of 14 for this assignment. From within here, I can see his submission, right? So I can click on view submission. That's going to take me to Adam's submission. Looking at the comments, looking at the notations, I can also see the grade, the attempt, the feedback, all of that information that I have available. And then once I'm done, I can come back exactly to where I was. Now, I haven't posted this grade. That's why I have this option to post the grade. If I go, for instance, I think it's Ella. No, who was it that I have posted the grade that it should? There we go. So Nina, in here, I posted the grade. Notice how the grade, to post the grade is grayed out, right? All right, let's go back to Adam so that way we can continue to review this panel. In here, I can also see the submission details for Adam, not just when the due date of this assignment, but also when he submitted. I have that submission receipt that it's always critical to avoid any gray areas for potential dishonesty or potential grade challenges, whatever that may be. And then I also have information about the submission, but also the category for this gradable item. As far as the assessment feedback, this is the area, just like within the grading workflows, providing you a different pathway also that if you want to leave feedback in here, you don't need to necessarily jump into the actual submission. You can just do it from within here, and not just the overall feedback, but also the feedback for the particular attempt as well. Now, this section in here, it is very useful and it is new, these grader notes. If I expand this is going to give me the opportunity now to make a note in here about this particular submission and about this grade. And the scope of this note will belong or will be within this grade and this assignment and this student. So as you can see, as an example, in here, I enter a note that said, student met with me during office hours regarding this assignment. I allowed 1-day extension due to documented accommodation. So this will be very useful, not necessarily a week from today, right? But maybe 6 months, a year from today, that if there happens to be a great challenge, or there happens to be, I don't know, like something where we need to come back and look at all of these. Now we have some documentation that will help the instructor know more about why that grade is, adding more data to that grade history, right? So additional grader notes that are really useful in the future in case they are needed. Let me shrink this a little bit, because now I want to lead you to these accommodations. This is the area where I can exempt the student, right? So I can turn this on, and then I can exempt Adam from the submission, or this is where I can just give an exception and change the due date for this student only. This is not an accommodation, and I know that this terminology may be a little bit confusing. But I'll show you a student, Ella, in just a little bit, who also has accommodations. But in this area, we're grouping not just the quote unquote traditional accommodations that I shared with you earlier, but also the accommodations that are an exception in here as well. This is also the area where I can increase the number of attempts, and then also the date for these as well, right? Let me cancel out of here so that way you can see the difference between Adam, who doesn't have accommodations, but you still have the opportunity to add an extension or an exemption. And if I go to Ella and look at that same assignment, and I go into the accommodations and I scroll down, notice how this area is grayed out, because after all, and it is letting me know in here, Ella does have accommodations associated with her, and the due date is not applying. I can still change the number of attempts, but whatever it is relevant for Ella's accommodations, in this case, the due date, notice how everything is grayed out. I still have the opportunity to exempt Ella, but just know that the gradebook also factors in those accommodations that Ella has or any student may have, and keeps you safe, if you will, and prevent you from changing any due date, since Ella already has accommodations associated with that. So with this, I am pretty much done giving you the overview of the gradebook. Let me pause to see if you have any questions related to this.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I actually posted it in the chat, but I was wondering if you can explain the difference between add extensions, the one that you just showed us under accommodation, and add exception.
Yeah, so when I said exception, I am talking about either extending the due date, or maybe just making this particular grading assignment accessible or viewable for my student from this date to this date. Obviously, I need to modify this, right? Anyways, I need to select the proper date in here. That's why I'm getting this message. So to answer your question, when I am talking about exceptions, I'm not just talking about one thing. I'm talking about either a due date extension, or just making content visible from one day to another. Let me uncheck this. Or even just changing the number of attempts that are allowed for this particular assignment. When I say exemptions, I'm just talking about, you know what, let's not even worry about any of those details. By me turning on this exemption, that means that this assignment will not have any impact on the overall grade.
No, I think maybe I didn't explain it very well. There's actually, in the accommodation window that you have open, it says add extension, which makes me think it's different from add exception, but it's the same criteria. It has due date, it has access date. The wording is just different. It says extension. Is that the same as exceptions?
Yes, it is the same. So yeah, and yeah, I apologize. Yeah, I didn't explain myself right. When I say exceptions, I'm talking about either an extension, or when the content is viewed, or changing the number of attempts. So exceptions is a group of an extension, an access date, and or the number of attempts allowed.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. Well, one more thing. Give me a second in here. One more thing available in here. Actually, no. Any more questions? I'm sorry. I was going to move away to show you just a couple of new updates that I think are going to be useful. Okay. Let me go now, going over here. I'm going to focus on one that I think it's relevant just based on my experiences when I was teaching, but also just overall feedback, right? So you may recall when you make that transition from original to ultra, a lot of faculty, not your faculty, a lot of faculty were focused on bringing their assessments over, in particular tests. Bringing all the questions, all the time and effort that they invest in building those questions. We provided a space to bring over question banks from original to ultra, so I'm going to go into these question banks. But one thing that was missing up until recently was that for any questions, whether it is on a question bank or questions embedded in a test, let me go back in here to not to export, I'm sorry, to edit this. I'm going to click on this. One of the options missing was the ability, I'm going to edit this question to illustrate, was the ability for us to, number one, give partial credit or negative credit, but most importantly, providing feedback, which is this option in here. This is new. Once I turn this on, providing feedback at the answer level. All right. In the past, yes, we were able to provide feedback, but for the overall question, so let me toggle this because you can either have one or the other. So in the past, we had the option to provide feedback if the students got the answer right or if the students got the answer wrong. But now that we are allowing partial credit and even negative scoring if necessary, right? Let me scroll back up and turn this back on. Now we also have the option to provide feedback at the answer level. So that's one of the options, okay? Or one of the updates rather. Now let me step away from here because also one update related to question banks is that now when I click on these three dots, I have the option to export this question bank and import that into a different course. And not only that, but export that following this standard, the QTI standard. So that way I can use this not just in Blackboard, but also in any other solution that may leverage the QTI standard as well. So again, this is something new. And now that we can export this, a new option that you will see when you want to create a new question bank is the ability to import something, okay? So just keeping that in mind. And then the last thing that I want to share with you, it is also as well, I mentioned to you the automation. So I'm going to go into this course, Animal Nutrition. And in here on the right-hand side, please ignore this. Some of you may have this option. Some of you may not have it. It doesn't matter for the purposes of today's conversation. What I want to point out right here is the automations option that you have available. So when I click on that, you will see that I have 4 automations created already, but let's review how these automations work. I'm going to create a new one. You have 3 types of automations. One to send a congratulatory message, another one to send a supportive message, and another one, remember when I was sharing with you that you can now review whether or not your students have reviewed the feedback. If they have not reviewed the feedback, you can also set an automation. So let's use this to illustrate the overall concept of this automation solution or option rather. If I configure this, I can determine or ahead of time that if my students do not review feedback for 3 days after I make it available, I'm going to select done. Now I can draft a personalized message that I can send to them. So that way I can tell them, for instance, you know what? Feedback is important for you to improve on your assessment. So please make sure that you review it or something along those lines. But as you can see in here, I can delete this and I can add my own message. Obviously, I wouldn't send this to my students, but this is a way for me to illustrate how these automations work. So with that said, And because again, I'm sorry I went 3 minutes over, but also I am so sorry that I to be 100% transparent, I was into something. I clicked the notification and I just, I'm sure it has happened to you. And if not, please forgive me. I was just too focused doing something that I just lost track. And Stephanie, thank you for just alerting me that I was needed somewhere else. So my apologies about that. This is the overall overview. So hopefully this brings value. And if you have additional questions, I'm all ears.
Thank you, Edgar. I appreciate it. We will wait on you for days. You are a treasure. I appreciate it. Guys, make sure that the third Friday of the month is on your calendar. We will meet on Teams in September. Our new friend from the marketing department is going to come and kind of ask us for thoughts and ideas on community engagement, the conference, all kinds of things. So save the date, guys.
All right. Well, thank you so much again and have a great Friday.
Thank you. Have a great back to school, guys. Enjoy.
Oh, yeah. Hang in there, guys. Hang in there. We're rooting for you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.